see what this says. All right. So welcome everyone to Monday's edition of Bizapalooza Chat. Today I'm going to start off with a really, really interesting story. NASA wanted to measure the creative potential of its rocket scientists, so they commissioned the test, of course. So they gave the test, but they had some more questions like, where does creativity come from? So they went and took this test and they gave it to some 4 and 5-year-olds. And the results were shocking. A full 98% of the kids scored as creative geniuses. Now, of course, this prompted even more questions. So they did a longitudinal study. So they followed these kids over the years. And basically what they've learned, which should be no surprise to anyone, is that the educational system basically killed any ounce of creativity that any of us had, because as it came down, the result was, if you're ready for this, only 2% of those adult kids fell into the creative genius range. After having 98% of them, only 2. So you've got to think, as machines and computers start taking over our mundane task, is creativity becoming more important? Now, we like to think that entrepreneurs and small business owners are a creative bunch. And in today's show, we're going to find out exactly if that's true and how that's true and how businesses can be even more creative. So I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest today, who is John Burkhart, creator extraordinaire. Hello, John. I'm so happy to have you.
Hello. Even though it's great to be here. I can't believe it's been 2 years.
I know. Has it been that long? That's pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. But I know that in our short session today, you're going to give us some really, really good tips. So here's what I got to ask you first. Okay. What is it that small businesses and big brands have to understand about creativity and innovation? What is it that they're not getting?
I think, the burning issue for me with creativity and the way that brands are approaching it is you got 2 different angles. You can focus on the science, the data, and the analytics and let that be the driver, or you can focus on the creativity and maybe even go, God forbid, with your hunches, as Bernadette Jiwa has said in her book called Hunch. And I think that issue, the art versus the science, is the debate that is forever kind of bubbling up in the front of my mind. And it's one that people are very divided on which leads.
Really interesting, right? So what is the result? Is it a science? Is it an art? I tend to think it's probably a combination of the 2.
It is. Now, I've just come back from Boston where we were shooting a promo film about this debate for this amazing conference that I'm involved in. And we couldn't really, even though I wanted to have a knockdown, drag out fight and let creativity win, the reality is, in the world we live in, where it's really hard to get people's attention, knowing where they are, what they're into, and having a little bit of the data is crucial. But it's just what you do with that data and the insights that you mine from it that can lead to better creativity. So I love the data side. I love geeking out on the fact that sometimes data can actually begin, the whole idea can begin with data. Like there's been a discussion, I shared it many speeches and workshops about Spotify's Christmas campaign. Do you remember it? Okay.
No, but you'll have to tell me.
I will tell you about it. So they looked at all of their data and they realized that, it not beyond Christmas. They did it last year as well. The one that pops into my brain at this moment was the billboard campaign outside the LA highway. On it, it says, whoever listened to blah, blah, blah's song called I'm Sorry 32 times in a row.
All right.
What did you do? And and they came up with hundreds of these ideas built on the data that only Spotify would have. Yes, there was a thing about privacy, and I don't care about that. The reality was they addressed human behavior in a funny way, and it made people warm to the brand. And I think that kind of data-led thing is brilliant, just like the one, because I work in sports marketing, the one I've been using for years is that little simple fact that guess how many babies, there will be a baby boom in the lovely city of brotherly love in 9 months from January the 31st. Why is that?
Why
Can
is
you tell
that?
me?
Well, oh,
I want you to. I want you to know.
There was a snowstorm. There was January 31st. It must have been cold.
I'll give you a hint. He drops back in the pocket. He's right.
Right.
Do you know what event that is?
Celebrating, yes.
Was it a big football match?
I think so.
A team from Philadelphia won? Yeah,
I think so.
I shouldn't mention that because I know Philadelphia is a city not too terribly far from the state of Ohio where you live, and there may be a rivalry, even though the Browns haven't won in several years, but I won't bring that up. But yeah, so it was Super Bowl babies. The NFL started based on the data, so leading with science, they started a choir where they found Super Bowl babies, people born exactly 9 months from the Super Bowl or thereabouts, who knew beyond a shadow of doubt that their parents were massive fans of their city's NFL team. And the reality, it was a lot of fun, and it got fans together. And while it wasn't like hard and fast analytical data, it was a data-led approach. And those, I collect examples of those, but then sometimes, like Bernadette says in her book called Hunch, sometimes you just have this little feeling that this little idea of putting a gorilla playing the drums with a Phil Collins track is going to be a viral hit for Cadbury's. And that, you can't run the data on that and stop trying.
So you've built an entire career around creativity, and I'd love to know why you think that creativity has become such a critical success factor for business today.
Okay. I think a lot of it has to do with this 60, basically what I talk about in some of my talks is what happens in 60 seconds of our time. Like in the time it's taken me to try to attempt to answer this question, there's been 990,000 people finding love by swiping right on Tinder. The reality is there's just too many people distracted by these little gadgets. Oh gosh, look, an old iPod. I couldn't find my couldn't find my proper. They're distracted by these bad boys. Like literally, I haven't heard a word you're saying because I'm just thumbing. And because of that, the only way to cut through, because everyone just wants to connect with their friends on these little screens, the only way to cut through is to have an insight that leads to something that's like, oh my goodness, I knew that. I just never thought of it in that way. And that when you have a big insight and you come up with a very creative way to handle that insight, it cuts through and everyone high fives, and usually 17 people go up to the awards show stage to get their award. But the reality is the reason I'm involved in leading training at places like the Cannes Lions is because their focus is on the creativity and the innovation. And I think it's the only way to get people's attention. If you keep doing what everyone else does, it's just going to be noise. And when I'm thumbing, the only way you can slow my scroll is by being creative.
That's perfect. Now, why do you think businesses are struggling with a lack of creativity? What do you think is killing it?
So what's killing it is usually rectangular rooms with a very large table made from several trees, basically making decisions in boardrooms. And I can give you examples of some of some creativity, quote unquote, that was made in the boardroom, like literally paint by numbers. Like, we got to include millennials. We need to include LGBT. We need everyone's into peaceful protests. We need to include that. Oh, we should actually add our little influencer because everyone loves influencers. And if she's from the world of fashion, even better because we can. So it's literally a paint by numbers kind of spreadsheet. When you come up with creativity based on spreadsheet, making sure you tick off all these boxes, sometimes you find that actually loses touch with humanity. And I feel that if you start with empathy and you really get to know the person on the street and not just what you think they think, then you'll realize, like, there would be so many people who would have told a bunch of people that this certain Pepsi ad that I just described to you that got banned within 5 hours, that certain Pepsi ad was never going to fly with the people they were trying to connect with. And to me, it's still a shock that boardrooms are creating that kind of thing.
I agree completely. You and I must have been grooving on the same thing, because that's exactly what I thought of this whole paint by number, check off the checklist. Let's be more creative, and then kind of killing the creativity from the start. But, one of the things you did mention, and then maybe this is an added question that I want to ask real quick, because we just got done saying that, data can inspire creativity, like the Spotify campaign. And at the same time, sort of looking at data and checking off check boxes can kill creativity. What's the balance?
So I think the balance is getting rid of the silos. I still find when I go into agencies and clients that they don't know what everyone else is doing, and this is a process thing, and they're not working together. When the reality is, marketing and sales and the C-suite and everyone has to work together and all know what each other's doing. So I think there's a lot of process to blame, but there's also a lot of story and brand purpose to blame, because some brands don't actually still in 2018 know what they stand for themselves, what they stand for in the minds of the people they want to reach more, and how they can tailor their story to meet those needs. And it's a lack of a content strategy many times, it's the presence of a content strategy that can sort of help solve those disconnects between we're this and no, you're not this, you're that.
Okay, so I think this is like my final question. So how can businesses, because I know you and I connected last year around your Curiosity project. So how can people or businesses use Curiosity to increase their creativity quotient?
Now this is gotten me really excited. So I've got a little 4-step way that I do this with brands and agencies who are working with brands. And that would be that we start off by questioning everything. And when we question what we stand for, who we're trying to reach, what they want, why we're on Twitter, what we're doing with Facebook Live, when we question everything, and we come up with a huge list on each side of what we stand for, also what people want, we basically just get this massive interrogation list. It starts with questions. It's an acronym I call QUIET. The QU is questions, the I is imagination, the E is empathy, and the T is testing. So that the questioning I just covered. Then we have to go to imagination, which is like, okay, let's come up with a way of all those questions. Let's take which of those questions will allow us to come up with an imaginative answer that will cut through the 8-second attention span of people just wanting to be on their phones and not really care about brands. And then we come up with several examples of that. And then after that, we go back to the data that we have done, because we're good, dutiful marketers. And we do know that attention deficit Andy and surprise me Sally, the personas that we've created, we know about them. We see which ones ladder up to those. That's the empathy. And then we have so much fun because then we actually just come up with ideas, prototypes, and we put them out there like a dove, put them out there into the world. Fly, baby, fly, and we'll see what sticks.
So
Quiet,
with
baby.
this empathy, so I want to go back. With this empathy, what you're saying is that you're going back and you're checking, you know, with the imagination, you're sort of brainstorming a bunch of things, and then you kind of go back and you check that against your data and your personas. Did I get that correctly?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Of course, the whole thing starts with you having the personas. But what I try to help people in my workshops is that we've already have to make some assumptions that you have that data, and then what my job is to do is to test to make sure that we've questioned every process, everything about the company, what we stand for, our content, the purpose of the channels. We question everything because all the time, I find there are things there that the company is doing just because it's what the person before them did. And that is, the world changes so quickly that you can't really say that we still need to be on Snapchat because the marketing manager that got fired said you should be.
So let's talk a little bit about testing. Is this the putting it back against, how is it that you test these creative ideas, right?
So I test it in lots of ways. There's usually I find that there's a brief for the purpose of the whole workshop that we need to enhance a certain area. So, if that is, we think through everything, but then we choose one channel. The thing is, you can't bite off more than you can chew. Sometimes with a sports client, I know for a fact that because a lot of brands, a lot of sports teams are doing amazing things on the Jumbotron, like the Golden State Warriors, the Seattle Sounders, on Instagram stories, that my testing needs to be around. We'll come up with all these processes and all these questions and know our fans better. But the test we're going to do is on Instagram. We can't test everything. That makes my head explode. I'm actually hurting right now just thinking about it. Just think I did this thing for a rugby club here in the UK, and we could not do these tests on every channel. I think I would have gone crazy, but we had to choose one and get that right, and then turn up and down the dials of what worked on that and see if any of that applies to the other.
Got it. So to wind this thing up in like 30 seconds or less, what is it that you think, give a little tip or process that a small business owner on a budget could maybe kick up their, what did you call it? Creativity quotient.
Yeah. Got you. Okay. So, I would have to start with the 3 S's, and the 3 S's for small businesses has to start with the story. I need to know, what is it about you that makes you remarkable, that only you can do. It might not be a big thing. It could be a small thing, but there's got to be some aspect of your story that we can latch onto, and you need to get that right. I mean, one of the guys I respect the most in this world is an author and a filmmaker, a guy called Donald Miller, that has this process called story brand. And he leads people through this amazing process because he's worked in Hollywood, and he's great and just a real authentic person. So once you get the story right, then I feel you can be constipated if you don't try to test that at speed. And so what processes within my small business, within what I can handle, could I do a little bit quicker? I know I'm too busy trying to get the supply chain fixed, but are there a few little things that I could prioritize and just get out there? Because I think a lot of small businesses say, we don't have time to do that. So, oh my gosh, I'm choking. I can't do anything. Well, no, you actually can do something, and find out what that thing that you can put on the speed dial is. It may just be Instagram, or it may be a blog twice a week. But you got to pick one thing that gets on speed dial, speed distribute, get it out there. So you got your story, you know what you stand for, then get something, choose to be speedy at that one thing, and then work on that for a while, and then find out what's working and what's not, and really focus on how you surprise your customers and how you surprise new customers, because sometimes things you think are working aren't, and you got to really analyze what's the bit that got people to slow the scroll. What is the bit that was most surprising? So story, speed, surprise. I think from my experience with working with small businesses, I know those sound like three fancy words, but I think if you actually spend some strategic time on all three of those in that order, you're going to see an uplift and growth in your community, and uplift in sales ultimately.
Hands up in the air. So awesome. So awesome. Hey, it's time to hit the chat. So I'm going to let you go. Jump on over to Twitter. All you people, hashtag Bizapalooza chat right now, where there is an awesome conversation going on all about doing creativity on a budget. Thanks so much for joining us. Join us here again next week. We're going to have an awesome show. John Burkhart, you're the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Even look forward to seeing you on the Twitter sphere.